We're starting off with the postmodernist views of the media. Now, when we speak about the postmodernist view of the media, before we get started, we need to familiarize ourselves. We need to know what the postmodernist view generally is, or we need to remind ourselves about the few points that I believe every student should always keep in mind regarding postmodernism. To begin with, whenever you want to write down about postmodernism, the first thing that I'd advise you all to keep in mind is, according to the postmodernist perspective, today there has been technological advancement. So number one, today there has been technological advancement. Now, when we speak about, or when we use the word postmodernism, advancement. Yeah, when we use the word postmodernism, what has to be kept in mind over here is this is about an era that has preceded modernism. Or when I use the word postmodernism, when I talk about postmodernism, this is about today. This is about contemporary society. So there are 4 points that I'd advise everyone. I keep on asking everyone to keep in mind about postmodernism, and you'd never hopefully go wrong. One, according to the postmodernist perspective, in this day and age today, there has been technological advancement, and this technological advancement, we can witness this in almost everything around us. And even if you talk about the class that I'm taking right now, is in itself an example of technological advancement. Number two, we have more of choice today as compared to the past. So the more of choice could be seen in terms of almost anything and everything. Number three, postmodernists are against meta narratives. Postmodernists are against meta narratives. And what does the word meta narrative over here mean? The word meta narrative over here in this context refers to big stories, narrative story, meta narrative, big story in this particular context. Now, when postmodernists claim they're against meta narratives, they're actually targeting the modernist theories. And let me just write this down over here as well. They're targeting modernist theories over here. And if we speak about these modernist theories such as functionalism, Marxism, feminism, even interactionism, they are all referred to as meta narratives in this particular context. So postmodernists are against meta narratives, and postmodernists over here claim that a single theory cannot explain anything in a definite manner. Just as confident as we see about, just as we confident as we see Marxists about their perception of how reality is like, as to how things go around in a society, equally we see feminists being confident in a similar manner. So is the case with functionalism and even interactionism. The fourth point that I'd want everyone to keep in mind is postmodernists believe absolute truth does not exist. Absolute truth does not exist. In other words, whatever is true today has the possibility of being proven wrong tomorrow. So something might look or might appear to be definite and absolute, but it is just what you see today in this particular in a particular situation. There's a possibility tomorrow, the day after, a week, a month, a year, a decade later, it might be proved that what was seen correct and absolute a decade ago might not be as absolute or as correct right now. So, having said that, these are some basic points that I believe every student should know when it comes to postmodernism. Now, let's move on and talk about the postmodernist view of the media. As we speak about the postmodernist view of the media, to begin with, for postmodernists, the media play a central role in people's life. According to the postmodernist perspective, the media play a central role in people's life. Not only that, according to Baudrillard, He argues that we live in a media saturated society. Now, what does it mean when we use the word a media saturated society? As we use the word media saturated society, this reminds me of the idea of the concept of hyperconnectivity. Now, what does the word hyperconnectivity over here mean? I'll just link it up over here. We're talking about hyperconnectivity. What does the word hyperconnectivity over here mean? When I use the word hyperconnectivity, the idea is that we are almost always, or rather say we're constantly, continuously connected with each other through the internet, through the social media websites, through different applications. And we this not only are we just connected, but this is instant communication. And I mean, imagine you can message someone thousands of miles away and expect a reply in less than 10 seconds. So, we're talking about one, the media playing a central role in people's lives. Number two, we're referring to the idea put forward by Baudrillard when he argues that we're living in a media saturated society in which we're surrounded by media images and spend an increasing part of our days consuming media messages. Now, again, in line with this idea of hyperconnectivity, this means that people are almost always consuming the media. I mean, imagine you wake up early in the morning. For most of you, the first thing you do is have a look at your news feed. You constantly consuming media, you're constantly sharing, you're constantly interacting with media content, which, in other words, it wouldn't be wrong if we say that the traditional boundaries between media producers and media consumers have blurred. Now, if I talk about traditional media, if we talk about television, if we talk about newspapers, if we talk about books, they was a very clear-cut distinction between who would produce the media content and who would consume it. In this day and age today, the distinction between a consumer and a producer has gotten blurred. If I may give an example over here, if you're scrolling down on your Instagram, you're consuming it. The very next second, if you click a picture and post it right there, you're a media producer in that case. So the traditional boundaries between media producers and media consumers have gotten blurred today. Anyone can create and share media content. Talk about Instagram users, talk about Snapchat users, TikTok users, YouTube creators, so on and so forth. Now, moreover, in this new world, the traditional distinction between representation, that is, media messages, and reality, the world outside the media, has broken down. This, I believe, is important if you are to understand the postmodernist perspective over here. So, the distinction between representation and reality has broken down. What does it mean when we talk about the distinction between a representation and reality breaking down? Instead, we live in a world of hyper reality. Now, this idea of hyper reality was initiated by Baudrillard. Again, what is hyper reality? Let me explain it to you first. Now, as we speak about hyper reality over here, I'll just pick up another color. As we speak about hyperreality over here, this refers to a condition where reality and media representations, they become so intertwined with each other that it becomes almost impossible to distinguish between what is real and what is media created. For instance, if I talk about reality TV, they create real dramas. Producers, they script them, they edit events, they enhance entertainment. They keep the audiences engaged as if it was real life, despite the manipulation. I mean, if you talk about a particular Netflix series, I've seen people eagerly waiting the next season, right? So they're keeping people engaged, they're keeping people connected as if it was real life. Likewise, if we talk about social media influencers in this day and age, if I may give you an example of the new media over here, social media influencers today, they present a very curated version of their lives, right? They show you their lives the way they want you to see their lives. So uh, and and to the point that people or a consumer or an end user starts believing that is how their life is like. If you talk about someone who makes vlogs, and if you talk about these vlogs here, a vlog would be what? 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes? They just show you 15 minutes of their day or of their life the way they want to show you that those 15 minutes. So the traditional distinction between representation and reality has broken down today. Instead, we live in a world of hyper reality, a world in which people can no longer distinguish between what is real and what is fake, between media simulations. Now, what does the word media simulation over here mean? Now, as I use the word media simulations, we need to understand. Now, as we use the word media simulations, we need to understand that media simulation, it refers to the way media creates a version of reality that feels real, but it is actually a construction. It's actually constructed for you. Instead of simply reflecting reality, the media replaces it with artificial images, artificial signs, or even artificial narratives. And over the passage of time, over time, this simulated version of reality becomes more influential than reality itself. In this day and age, your generation can understand this real well. You've seen social media influencers, the way they depict their reality. It's a media simulation. It's a media simulation because the media constructs that reality for you. They're not just reporting an event for you. They're not just reporting someone for you like it was assumed to happen back in the past. So this has essentially blurred the distinction between reality and fiction. And people have actually started responding to the media rather than them responding to reality. So taking this ahead, uh where you go. The distinguish the hyper reality, a world in which people can no longer distinguish between what is real and what is fake, between media simulations and the real thing, because media message images have come to constitute such an important part of this lived reality. In fact, Baudrillard goes further Baudrillard goes further, arguing that the media provide us with simulacra. Now, what does the word simulacra over here mean? Simulacra is they're copies of things that never had an original. Now, for instance, if I give you an example, in this postmodern world, we interact more with simulacra than we interact with reality in itself. So, media ends up creating endless layers of these copies, leading to a reality that is based on representations rather than actual experiences. For instance, like I'd given an example a little earlier, celebrities these days, they have a very constructed identity where their public persona is a simulacrum that is shaped by media teams. They have different uh they have different teams that are working on their public persona. There are different there different brand there's different branding that is done. There are different filters that are used. Or if I may give you another example, so this celebrities example is a real, I mean, they, even when you talk about paparazzi, that's shown to you as if it was something that just happened. It was coincidental. In many cases, I'm sure you've heard of instances where there's a very strong link that has been found between these apparent paparazzi and celebrities themselves. In most cases, they say they're paid. They're paid to click pictures or randomly go meet a celebrity, randomly come across a celebrity, and maybe just interview them in a very informal manner, making it look like, oh, it was just a coincidence. In most cases, it's planned. Now, taking this ahead, yeah. So, in fact, Baudrillard goes further, arguing that the media provide us with a simulacra, that is, the images of things that do not exist in reality. I could give you another example over here. A McDonald's burger that you see on a billboard, it looks perfect. It looks I think the word perfect in itself explains it all. But the question is, do you think the real burger matches the image? I mean, if you ordered a burger from McDonald's, when you when it reaches you, or even if you walked into any McDonald's chain and you go order yourself a burger, does it look like? I mean, you could just try it out, go order something, pick it up in your hand, and I'm sure if you have a look around at that very eatery, you'd see a very amazing picture of that burger in that vicinity in itself, in those premises in itself. Just hold the burger, unwrap it, and open it up. And don't open up the burger. So, yeah, just open up the wrapper, or whatever the protective paper is on it. Just pick it up, hold it in your hand, and take a picture of that burger with a picture that is probably displayed in that very same room, and then question yourself, is this what I was shown? So a McDonald's burger in an advertisement, like I said, looks perfect, but no real burger matches the image. It's a simulacrum, it's a copy of an ideal that never existed. So I hope you've understood what hyperreality is, what media simulations are, and what a simulacra is. So in fact, Baudrillard goes further, arguing that uh, arguing that the media provide us with simulacra, images of things that do not exist in reality. For him, modern society is based on the production and exchange of free floating signs, words, images, and so on that have no connection with anything in real. So I just give you two examples, and I hope that would help. So, for Baudrillard, entertainment, information, and communication technologies provide experiences that are so intense and involving that everyday life cannot compete. Disneyland, for example, in California, represents the epitome of hyperreality for Baudrillard. Now, we're talking about Disneyland. Some of you might have been to Disneyland. Some of you might uh some of you might have been to Disneyland. Others, I'm sure, have heard about Disneyland. So Disneyland in California, for example, represents the epitome of hyperreality for Baudrillard. And this is very often used as an example of hyperreality, which is again a concept that was put forward by Baudrillard's postmodern perspective or postmodern theory. In hyperreality, like I said, the distinction between reality and simulation is blurred, and the media creates experiences that become more real than reality in itself. For instance, uh, Disneyland, I'm sure you are aware, it presents a very idealized version of different places and even historical periods. Tomorrowland, Fantasyland could be examples here, where visitors feel like they're traveling to different worlds, even though they're carefully designed simulations rather than authentic experiences. And do you realize how everything in Disneyland uh, is a curated or portrayed to create an idealized and a very sanitized world where there is no crime, no dirt, no disorder? It actually ends up offering a fantasy version of the American culture. When I use the word fantasy version of the American culture, they're trying to reinforce a sense of nostalgia that never truly existed. If you talk about fictional characters like Mickey Mouse, like the Cinderella, they you see them existing in physical form, creating an illusion that they are real. Now think about it, is Mickey Mouse for real? Even when you're a grown up, whenever you do visit Disneyland, you'd come back and tell 10 people, hey, do you know what? I came across Mickey Mouse. I shook hands with Cinderella. You make it sound like they are real. Whereas in reality, they're a depiction of something that in reality did not exist. It never did. At places like these, you see how Kids, and not only kids, even adults, they interact with these characters as if they were real people, making the very fictional world more believable than reality in itself. Many people, many visitors, you see them suspending the belief and fully engaging with the fantasy world, often preferring it over the real world. And as soon as you leave the gates, or if you're done for the day, you're leaving Disneyland, you'd realize, oh wait, that wasn't even real. But when you're engaging with it, when you're a part of it, it is a better version of reality, a better version of reality that never existed. And these experiences, they're so immersive that it feels more real than actual historical or cultural experiences. Now, taking this ahead, for Baudrillard, entertainment, information, and communication technologies provide experiences that are so intense and involving that everyday life cannot compete. Disneyland in California, for example, represents the epitome of hyperreality for Baudrillard. People go to see simulations of worlds. Frontierland, Main Street, USA, Orleans Square, which either never really existed in the first place or which represent idealized and sanitized versions of historical reality. Likewise, if we talk about reality TV shows such as The Big Brother, The Real Housewives franchise, and Keeping Up with the Kardashians, which are supposedly unscripted, which are supposedly unscripted, live broadcasts or recordings of real life situations, supposedly focus on this world, and they often feature an otherwise unknown cast of individuals who are not professional actors. They provide another example of the blurring of fiction and reality. So, the question that rises over here is, are the people we're watching acting or just being themselves? Or, for the matter of fact, does this distinction that we're trying to draw over here even make sense? So, we were discussing the postmodernist perspective on media. We initially went on to discuss Baudrillard, and we discussed Baudrillard in detail. Now let's take this ahead and talk about Sherry Turkle. Sherry Turkle is a, a professor of the social studies of science and technology, and she has a PhD degree in sociology and personality psychology. Now, taking this ahead, let's have a look at as to what Sherry Turkle has to say. Now, Sherry Turkle echoes Baudrillard. Now, think over it. Try to recall in your head, try to recall in your head what I just explained you about Baudrillard a minute ago. Now, Sherry Turkle echoes Baudrillard when she talks about television as part of the postmodern culture of simulation, where we allegedly learn to identify with the simulated world of television more readily than we do with the real world around us. According to Turkle, such simulation laid the groundwork for the next development in the relationship between reality and simulation. Of course, when you're talking about the postmodernist perspective, when we're talking about blurring of reality and media representation, how can you miss virtual reality? Now, when we speak about virtual reality, I'm sure most of you has experienced virtual reality or use virtual reality devices. The development of virtual reality is a term used to describe three-dimensional computer generated environment that simulate our experiences of the real world. An early example was provided by Second Life. What is Second Life now? It's an online game. Now, An early example was provided by Second Life, where users can create their own characters using avatars, increasingly popular today. However, our virtual reality games using VR headsets such as Oculus Rift, HTC Vive, PlayStation VR, Gear VR, and Daydream, this is these are all very popular devices, very popular examples of VR headsets. Like I gave you an example of Second Life. Now this was a game that was launched, if I'm not mistaken, in 2003. This game, it allowed users to create avatars, to explore digital environments, to interact socially, to engage in uh, spending via virtual currency. This game, Second Life, we usually give an example of this game because it has been said, it is believed that it became a pioneering platform for digital identity and virtual economies. Taking this ahead, which again explains us or is another example of hyperreality simulations. Taking this ahead, if we try evaluating the postmodernist perspective, number one, to begin with, postmodernism does seem to have captured something about a world in which media images have become all pervasive and where people spend a vast amount of time looking at television, mobile, tablet, and computer screens. Moreover, anecdotal evidence such as the stories that actors who have anecdotal evidence. Now, over here, we need to know what the word anecdotal evidence over here means, and this is perhaps a point that you could use if you get a question on the postmodernist perspective. Yes, we've discussed so much, but why is it that we're referring to all of this as anecdotal evidence? For this we need to understand what the word anecdotal evidence over here means. When I use the word anecdotal evidence, we're talking about evidence that does not offer uh, a direct experience, offer does not offer experimentation. Now the opposite of anecdotal evidence would be empirical evidence. Anecdotal evidence is evidence, or it's more like a speculation, whereas empirical evidence is based on facts. It is to support a hypothesis or hypotheses. Empirical evidence is something that is verifiable, something that is considered to be more objective. It has to do with data that is scientifically collected or collected through scientific methods. So empirical evidence versus anecdotal evidence. Anecdotal evidence is evidence or supposed evidence that does not offer any verification. I think that explains it all. Now, moreover, anecdotal evidence such as the stories that actors who have played villains in soap operas tell us about being accosted or addressed badly in the street by angry members of the public attacking them for their evil behavior, suggesting that some people do indeed have trouble distinguishing between representation and reality. However, postmodernism has been the subject of extensive criticism here. Number one, first, its claim that the pursuit of objective truth is misguided is epistemologically flawed. Now, what does this word epistemologically over here mean? When I use the word epistemologically, here you go. The branch of philosophy that is concerned the branch of philosophy that is concerned with studying the grounds of knowledge, that is the basis on which someone can claim to know that something is true. Now, read this again. Read this again and see if you understand this. Like this reads, the branch of philosophy that is concerned with studying the grounds of knowledge, that is the basis on which someone can claim to know that something is true. Or, in other words, if I put it in a simple manner, how we know what we know, right? It wouldn't be, I think I'll just write it down over here. or when you're exploring questions such as what exactly is knowledge? How did we gain this knowledge? How can we trust our beliefs? So, taking this ahead, first, its claim that the pursuit of objective truth is misguided is epistemologically flawed. This claim rests on the assertion that all knowledge is relative, yet the claim itself is stating that this particular assertion is not relative, but true. Presumably, now, if I may give you an example, remember when postmodernists claimed absolute truth does not exist? The fourth point that I'd written down. When you're claiming absolute truth does not exist, how do you expect us to believe that whatever you've explained us, whatever I've tried explaining you about the postmodernist perspective, can be true? I mean, when we are carrying a mindset that absolute truth in reality does not exist and truth in itself is relative, how do we believe that whatever the postmodernist perspective is explaining is truth and not relative? So, presumably, postmodernists want us to take the claim they make about society seriously, that they're saying something at the same time they're denying the possibility of objective truth. Second, the claim that postmodernism make about the power of the media today are not generally backed up by extensive empirical research. For example, the claim that people are unable to distinguish between media representations and reality because the two have become fused in people's mind is a strong claim about media effect that is open to empirical investigation. But postmodernists do not seem to be interested in carrying out such investigations. So again, the evidences, even if they provided, they are better known as anecdotal and not empirical. Taking this ahead, if we talk about Greg Philo and David Miller, they argue that it is perfectly possible to compare media images with reality and to highlight inaccuracies and misrepresentations. A media image is a measurable part of reality in its own right, and the processes by which it is manufactured can be analyzed and exposed. I mean, you could talk about the we could you could talk about the work that was done by uh, the work that was done by Greg Philo and David Miller, the work that the popular research that they had conducted about the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Now, if we recall, if we try reminding ourselves about the work that was done by Greg Philo and David Miller, they tried explaining how the Western media had a very different version of reality depicted when it came to the Israel and Palestine conflict. They the way Israel was portrayed compared to the way Israel was portrayed compared to the way Palestine was portrayed, it was very different. Now, likewise, you could I'm trying to recall the name of the book they wrote. So yeah, it was, I believe, More Bad News from Israel. If you try, you could Google this. They tried reporting how the Israel-Palestine conflict was shown by the media. They argue that it was the perspective of the more powerful side, that is Israel, that framed the entire coverage. They identified how they were how there were two very different perspectives over the conflict. The Israeli authorities, how along with the Israeli authorities, along with the Israeli population, they saw the conflict in terms of their security and survival. Whereas, and according to Greg Philo, and I believe it was Berry, they believe that Palestinians, they see themselves as resisting a brutal military occupation by the people who have taken their land. So if you get a chance, do Google this. In fact, this is in your book as well when you're studying when you're studying, what's the name of the topic here? Understanding news production and its effect under the broader heading of media content. So taking this ahead, moreover, research that has been carried out on, for example, reality TV programs, this suggests that audiences have few illusions about what they're viewing. Hill in the year 2002 studied audience responses to Big Brother in the UK. When asked about the program, regular viewers felt that they were elements of reality and that it was not scripted and featured non actors, but they were well aware that they were watching something that had been constructed, that had been contrived by the producers to make entertaining television. Finally, left wing critiques attack postmodernists for adopting what appears to be a radical posture, but which actually functions to undermine the examination of structures of power and inequality in society. Instead, it encourages an ironic detachment from any issue which seems to take the idea of objective truth seriously. Now, if I try explaining this to you in the most simple and basic manner, don't you think postmodernists, while they're emphasizing, or rather say overemphasizing on the amount of choice we have, don't you think they tend to undermine the power, the sheer power, the force of these structures, which for many might be the absolute reality? Now, I hope this lesson has helped you understand the postmodernist perspective on media.